Craig Peterson, Craigpeterson, better known as Pete West, Petewes. That's from Pete West Montgomery. Oh, Terry Lewis, Jeremy Jam, all of them, yeah. I used to teach Terry Lewis theory. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. Well, I am Bobby Lyle in a great way. He's one of my heroes. You know, little known, I wanted to play keyboard. I really wanted to play violin. You know, I started playing an instrument when I was 5 years old. I found a harmonica. I lived in the projects and I sat on the curb and I'd sit there and I'd blow that harmonica. I didn't know what I was doing, but I'd blow it and people would come by and give me money. You know, and I sit there doing it. And so time went on, somehow I lost it. Or somebody took it from me. It came up missing. So that part went on and then I found a ukulele. You know, I got the strumming on that thing and man, I said, I like this. You know, but I wanted to play violin. I love violin, you know. My mother said, okay, well, I'm gonna get you some violin lessons. I went to one lesson for violin and I couldn't play it because the teacher wanted me to hold the instrument this way. And I said, I have to hold it like, you want to hold it like this? I have to hold it like this. I'm left-handed. And he said, no, I can't teach you like that. I said, I won't play it like that. I got to hold it like this. So that never went any further. That just sat right there. And so like I said, I found a ukulele and started messing with that. And one of my heroes, Michael Powers, from here, who happens to be a cousin of whom I call the master as far as guitar is concerned, Jerry Hubbard. He was people would say to me countless times, man, you're better than Jerry, man. And I say, no, Jerry is the master. That's it, that's all. That man did what Bobby Lau did. He mastered his instrument. He's the only man I know that could sit there and play anything and have a conversation with you as if, I mean, he'd sit there and talk and he'd be all over his guitar. It just used to blow my mind, you know. But I bought a guitar from Mike Powers for $10. He sold me a guitar, and that was how I got started. He taught me my first chord, and I went on with that chord and banged on it for a while until I got tired of it, and I started learning how to do other things. I'm really self-taught. I've never had a formal music lesson in my life. Wow. You know,
just from here, huh?
Yeah, from wanting to learn. You know, I'm playing the instrument, and I'm getting all kinds of praises for it. You know, being able to play, and people wanted to hear me, listen to me, and people wanted to learn from me and all that. Well, you know, when I started teaching what I knew, I didn't know enough to continue, so I decided to go learn more for myself. So I bought music books and I asked questions about different things. From being around Jerry and Bobby Lau, I heard things about the Dorian modes and all those things, so I started to study them. You know, all these modes, different scales and patterns and things. And so it taught me, you know, or I taught me through learning like that how to do different things, how to play. And that grew, that escalated. I just continued to grow from that. I thirst for knowledge of guitar, you know, which was just music. My mother told me, she said, music, and she was not a musician, not at all, by no means, but she said music is nothing but math. She said it's all math. And for years, I never forgot she told me that, but for years I tried to figure how that was so. And then one day I just sat down and understood that You know, you got the first and the third and the fourth and the fifth, and you know, all these have a place in music, no matter where you are. You know, there ain't nothing but 12 or 13 different notes. That's it. You know, so in that, you know, where do you find the first, the fifth, and all? Now, how do you make all of that work? And just one day, it just clicked in my mind, and it was just there. So I was able to gain that knowledge, and from that, you know, we used to, when we used to do dances and have our little parties, we used to play at the Wade, we used to play at the Hole, we used to play at the Young Adult Center, and we used to go all around. It's funny, I got to go back a little bit and say, because it really started, my career started with young players. And young players started in a hallway at 1207 Oliver, sitting on the steps because we didn't have any amplifiers, so we had to take our guitars and lean them on the steps. And the vibration of the steps would give us the sound so we could hear them. You know, and when I say it's me and Albert Townsend, which was the bass player, you know, we really were the young players. That's where it started. And so then we decided to go out and try to get a band. One of the persons we seek was Leroy McGowan. At that time, he wasn't a keyboard player. He just had a piano in his house. But he wasn't a keyboard player. He was a singer. And we said, well, we'll get Bunsey, which is his nickname, we'll get him to sing with us. And so Bunsey, he came on singing, and we decided we needed a keyboard. And he said, well, you got a piano, man. He said, well, I'll learn how to play this thing. I swear, in a matter of a few minutes, man, it seemed like Bunsey was playing that thing. And we had people like Jerry Hubbard and Gene Hubbard and Bobby Lyles who were coming through. I'm going to try to, I can't put it in the order that it took place, but, you know, they would come through and they would, you know, they would mentor us. They would teach us. They would talk with us, and, you know, because these are people who mastered their instruments. People, I wish the world would really know Gene Hubbard was one of the greatest drummers in the world. He was so phenomenal. It was just, it's out of this world how he was. You know, Gene Hubbard had offers from, what's his name, Count Basie. Oh my God. You had people like that, but Gene just, you know, he didn't want to play what they played. You know, it was too uniform for him. It was too much in the box. Gene played outside of the box, and he could do that. And Jerry, his brother, like I said, I call him the master. Well, I'll put it to you this way. To master an instrument, man, takes so much more than what anybody knows. You know, if anybody, I would say Sonny. Prince could play his instrument well. I mean, phenomenal musician, an extraordinary player, you know, but just a player, not a master. Sonny's a master. Sonny's a master. Sonny mastered his instrument, and I don't think Sonny knows it. You know, you really have to be able to. Lucky O'Noise. He's the guy that wrote the theme song to that show that used to come on, Mr. Lucky. And he moved across the hall from us. And we used to stay right over Esther's funeral home. There was apartments up there. And we lived up there. All my friends would never come see me because they'd stay over a funeral, man. I'm not going to see it. It's crazy. So, Lucky Illinois, he used to hear me play. I never knew he was a guitarist. I never knew it. I'd see him every day, and he'd come out, yeah, you sound pretty good, Craig. That sounds pretty good. And I'm always complaining because I just didn't never like what I did. He said, you got it? He said, I can hear it. He said, I can hear it. You know, and that's what I'm going to say to you about a master. I can hear it. You know, not just something that, you got a lot of great players, you know, a lot of great players. somebody from South Minneapolis, Solomon Hughes. Solly, man, just phenomenal. These are phenomenal musicians, masters. Segovia, yeah, you know. You have to get up on those levels. There's just certain levels where it's just something you can't even put it in words. Wes Montgomery was a master.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
He was a master, and that was probably my greatest joy. We was practicing one day. We was playing at the Way, and in walks this guy, man, with Dan Poche. He had a full-length mink on. I mean, hit the top of his shoes, man. His shoes could never get dusty because the mink was shining them all the time, man, you know. And he stood there and looked at me, and I'm looking at him, and I said, boy, the guy really looks familiar. He said, you know who I am? Oh, no, I don't know. He said, I'm Wes Montgomery. I darn near dropped my guitar. Damn near dropped my guitar. He said, I come to check you out. He said, because I've heard about you. And I'm like, well, damn, I ain't went nowhere. And over some of the traveling, I have heard that from other musicians. Milwaukee and different places, when I went to Chicago, when I went down south and out east, I heard people say, yeah, we heard about a left-handed guitar player, you know, that plays the jazz style. There was a nightclub here called the Blue Note. And it almost brings me to tears when I think about the mastery that went through that place. Bobby Louse, Frank Edwards, Walter Thornton, Gene Hubbard, Jerry Hubbard. I mean, these people were so good, and it surprised me with Bobby because these musicians were so good, it was hard for anybody else to work with them. You know, you see the arrogance of Thelonious Monk. You know, super arrogant, but that's how good he is, and he knows it. But he ain't that good, really. You know, because he won't let himself get out the box. You know, and he keeps that arrogance there, and it really stifles him. And it stops him. But with us here on the north side, all we had was each other. You know, if you wanted to learn guitar, you had to hear the name Jerry Hubbard. If you wanted to learn drums, you had to hear the name Gene Hubbard. Because if you didn't at least seek knowledge from them, you didn't want to know how to play. You had to at least seek some of the knowledge that they had. You know, I got fortunate. Years went on, and I moved on, and I ended up at a place called Metropolitan Community. And there I had the opportunity to teach. And at that opportunity, I learned how to play 8 other instruments. I play 8 different instruments, or used to. Yeah, I taught myself how to write. I taught myself how to read. I taught myself how to sight read. I taught the University of Minnesota. I've written compositions that, you know, accomplished pianists couldn't play, and I wasn't a keyboard player. And I don't mean no one note thing. I mean just great big blocks of chords, and oh man, I just, you know, it was phenomenal. But all that comes from Bobby. All that comes from Jerry. All that comes from, you know, I had an opportunity to not only hear some things, but to internalize it. So it became a part of me, you know. So I knew when I was listening to a master. You know, I knew when I was listening to somebody that wanted to be. Wes Montgomery was a master.
Do you remember how old was Sonny when you first,
About 13,
okay.
12 or 13 years old.
Same with Prince?
Prince was about 12, 13, right around there, yeah. There's a funny thing about music, and when it comes to an instrument. It's not that, you have a whole lot, an extended amount of time for formal lessons or anything like that. What makes you, and what separates you is your desire to play. And you can hear it in the first few notes that anybody tries to play. Playing an instrument requires a touch. It requires something that's between you and the instrument, a respect. And you can see and hear it in people who are just trying to play it, as opposed to people who love it and want to touch it and make it sing. And not everybody can make an instrument sing. Some people, I mean, there's people who can play. They really play, but you don't hear the love between them and an instrument. You don't hear that respect that they have for not only the instrument but the music that they're playing. Prince had it. Prince not only was a good entertainer, he was a good musician. He took his music seriously. He didn't play with it. Him and Andre, him and Sonny, all of them, they took their music seriously, and he understood the relationship between him and his instrument, and not the relationship between trying to play music and trying to sound like somebody and trying to this, that. He understood that, and he got close with his guitar. But Prince played other instruments too. He wasn't just the guitarist. Sonny started on the guitar. That's where Sonny and I got together on the guitar. And he just decided he wanted to play the bass. So he and I together was sitting there and he said, yeah, Craig, I'm going to play the bass. And he went on and played the bass, and it turned into one of the most phenomenal bass players there is. He's just great. But like I taught anybody, is how to play correctly. People, and when I say that, I mean, there's a foundation in music. And you don't have to stay within the box, within the realms of what everybody teaches and all that, but you have to know that there's a foundation. You have to understand that. And you have to know how to build. It's like being a contractor. It's like starting with a few boards and a nail. Mm-hmm. And you come in there and you start building. And you start understanding the form and how to put it all together and how to make sense of it. And how to make it not only make sense of it, but how to make it make you feel. Me and Jerry and I, we used to sit down and play back and forth with each other. He'd play something and I'd come back with it, and then he'd play something. And we got to a place where we'd say, what'd you say? What'd you say? And we talk back and forth at each other, and we understood the foundation. We understood that it's a language. And, many a times, Jerry and I talked about this, we'd sit there and look out in the audience and just pick one person out of the audience and just start having a conversation with them. And it's phenomenal when you can get that person's attention. Mm-hmm. People sitting there, they dancing and they ain't even thinking about what you're doing, but all of a sudden, you're so focused on this individual and you just playing and playing, and all of a sudden they stop and listen as if they understand, man, he's talking to me. You know, yeah, he's saying something to me. You know, and Prince understood that. Sonny definitely understands. You know, Jimmy, Terry, you know, they understand that. Minnesota holds so many fine musicians here. It's rich, just rich. And one of the reasons why it's rich is because we're 500 miles away from anybody doing anything. You know, we had to make our own stew. That's Minnesota style, our own stew. You know, yeah, because we didn't have a neighborhood with people like the Temptations running around and, you know, different folk like that. We were our own ingredient. So we made our own stew, and it works. Wow. Yeah, and it works right to this day. What made me give back? It came to me free, you know, and that is a phenomenal question, because that's something about me not too many people really knew and or understood. I taught so many people. That's how I learned how to play other instruments, was because people wanted to know how to play piano, and I wasn't a pianist, so I learned, so I could teach it. I didn't know how to play saxophone, so I learned, so I could teach it. Now, I wasn't a phenomenal sax player, but I could teach you how to play it. You know, trumpet and different instruments. There were a lot of instruments that I learned how to play. Other people wanted to know. And so I invested myself and my time into learning how to play other instruments, because I love music too. I love the sound of other instruments, and when I could make them things say things, that thing there, boy, I used to be phenomenal. I used to be hell on the piano. Yeah, and nobody knows that. Nobody even knows it. Jerry Hubbard, when he was playing, and he said, man, we can't find a keyboard player. I said, you can't? He said, no. He said, man, you want to come over and play keyboard for us? I said, how do you know I play? I heard about you, man. He said, I heard about you. He said, I heard, man, you tear that thing up, which was true. I could play. I used to play the shit out of piano, because that was an instrument I wanted to learn how to play. And so, but, you know, as far as the community is concerned, I think one of my favorite students was someone who was unknown, not recognized, John Jefferson. He was walking down the street one day, and I was at home practice, and I stayed at 718 Elwood. And I heard this knock on my door. Finally, I got up and I went and answered the door, and I said, hey. He said, hey, he knew me. We knew each other. He said, Greg. I said, yeah. He said, man, I've been listening to you practice. He said, sometimes I come by here and sit on your steps and just listen to you practice. I said, really? He said, yeah, man. He said, I want to learn how to play. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, well, come on, man. I'll show you. I'll show you what I know. And what made me give was the more I gave, the more I learned. If I sat there and sat on that information, that's all I had, was that information. But if I gave it out, and I mean, I'd pour out of my flask till it was empty. I'd come back the next day and I'd have that much more. I'm just amazed at the fact that if you give, you have. So I quit keeping it to myself, and I never denied anybody that ever wanted to be taught, you know. And I continued on my journey. I went to Macphail School of Music and taught Suzuki. You know, yeah, it was stuff like that. Never had a formal lesson. Never had a formal lesson. You know, but I love music that much that I wanted to learn. I remember every good boy does fine at FAC in school, and that's all I needed to know. And that took me all the way across the board to reading, you know, everything. The way was special to all of us because it was a place to go. It was where we were safe. You know, we came there and we didn't have to worry about gangs and, you know, all that kind of stuff. We could go there, and the way offered so much. It gave us an opportunity to express ourselves, not only through music, because there was sports involved. We was involved in boxing and things like that. I won the Minnesota ping pong state championship out of the way. Nobody knows that. Yeah. Gary Reese, you know, they were having a tournament. It was the last of the tournament. And he took my place and played in my steed for the tournament because I had beat him the day before. So he said, I'm not going to take that away from you. And he took that. And so he won the tournament. But he said, this is for you, Craig, because this is what, you know. But the way gave us opportunities. They gave us way deeper than that. The way was about self-respect. You know, if I said anywhere in my life did I learn anything about being black, I learned it at the way. You know, I learned how to respect myself. I learned how to respect my people. I learned that there. There was no other. Phyllis Wheatley existed, but Phyllis Wheatley was on a whole different level about a whole bunch of different things. It was about the money. And even though as a young man I wasn't involved in the politics of the Phyllis Wheatley, you could feel it. It just wasn't from the heart. You know, it wasn't nothing happening that people really cared about you. That really said, hey man, you know, brother, this is how we do this. You know, and I learned that from the way. And that's what made it special. You know, there was a place we could go and we could commune with each other, but with love and respect. There just wasn't no fighting and no bunch of, you know, misunderstandings or anything. It was just wonderful. Loved it, you know, miss it to this day, that I know that there's a place where my grandchildren can go get what I got. We were a community that communed, you know, that came together, that loved one another, and we knew one another, but outsiders were fine. We didn't push anybody out, we didn't, you know. And I say we because after an extended period of time, I became a functional part of the way, you know. Even though my music kind of pulled me out, I still, you know, that's home. You know how you get up and you leave home and you go see the world, but nobody can't tell you where home is. Nobody can tell you what home actually has for you, because you couldn't find that kind of love anywhere else. You know, real love. You know, and I'm sure there's other places that did that throughout the country, but for Minnesotans, it happened at the way. You know, yeah, these brothers, Seal Davis, and Dan Poche, and people like that, they really loved us. You know, if we get in trouble, I mean, they were there for us. I'm going outside of the music, you know, because that's what made music good. You know, you had a place to go to where you could come back and sing the praises of where you was raised and how you was raised. And, you know, some of the notes I played weren't notes from me or anybody other than just from where I was at the Way. You know, I'm playing at the Way, man, and we jamming. Yeah, we had big, beautiful parties and all that, you know. Very, very, very seldom was there any fights. If there was, it's usually from somebody coming from St. Paul or over south from a whole different community, not understanding what's going on. But that was seldom. I mean, that was so seldom, you know, because we was about each other. It didn't matter where you came from, you know. And I just got so much more to say and when it comes to the music, because we had people like Walter Thornton, he's from here, Oscar Peterson, Oscar Patterson.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know Oscar Peterson.
Yeah, Oscar Patterson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, Vernon Coffey. People don't know, that was my uncle. He was a guitarist. I played for years, and we never got a chance to hear each other. When I heard my uncle play, I said, damn it, no wonder I can play so good. That man can play the mess out of guitar. Yeah. He had a band called Coffee and the Cups, and he played around town. And yeah, it was just, you know, but that was from Tommy Lewis down at the Blue Note. Tommy kept artists coming, Jack McDuff, Jimmy McGriff, you know, artists like that were coming through the Blue Note, you know, Jerry Bennett and Billy Rogers. These ain't just players, these some masters here coming through. They could play the shit out of the instruments, you know, yeah. And Tommy Lewis allowed that, you know. Frank Edwards, he was so good, he used to play his organ with his tongue. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's funny.
Frank used to play, and he'd have a song going, and he'd stick a few things in the keys and get up and leave the keyboard sitting there on the stage and sound good. Yeah, was playing music. Yeah, it sounded good. It was phenomenal. Donald Thomas, and you know, just so many musicians. I would just like to, you know, I wish, you know, there was a time where I could just run off some names, because these people need recognition. You know, they're soulful musicians. And that was another thing about being a musician here from Minnesota. You played with a whole different kind of soul. You know? Oh, man. Like Mahalia Jackson. If you listen to her, and if you got any kind of soul, you'll know that this woman's singing from her heart. She's singing from her life experience. If you just listen to her, you'll cry, because she's singing life. You know, she's singing life. And that's where so many musicians coming out of here played from their soul. You know, you could just, people were real. We didn't know no other way. We didn't have nothing else to imitate. You know, there was, you know, we didn't have the Temptations and all that. Barry Gordy and that whole big franchise up there. And then what they got in Chicago, all that's going on there, in Memphis and all them places. We didn't have none of that. All we had was each other. You know, and it really worked and developed. And developed. It developed into a monstrous thing. You know, Prince took it and pulled it up. You know. But it started here with, I won't say me, but it started here, because those that gave to me, I gave back. And I taught anywhere from, I'd say, 200 to 300 students a year. Yeah, we had to rely on ourselves, but that was a good thing. It was stifling, you know. At first, I used to wish I could be somewhere where I could see, you know, some of the well-known musicians and entertainers and learn from them and have conversations with them and all that. But it just made us come from within, you know, because it was there. We just had to pull it out, you know. But it was painful in a lot of ways, because a lot of people didn't understand Minnesota sound. A lot of people didn't like it at first, because they ain't never heard that mess before. They were like, what is this? You know, they couldn't understand it, because it wasn't what the rest of the country's doing and what everybody else everywhere else is doing. We learn how to take people's stuff and put a spin on it and make it different and still enjoyable. And then finally it caught on. People said, "Oh man, these dudes is bad." These dudes, I used to go all the time. I'd go places like, I went to Texas, or one time I went to Kentucky. I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was playing down there at the bar. And yeah, man, the guys like, "Oh no, we don't like this guitar player. Oh no," he just, they just wasn't used to it. Well, they had sent for me, so I was there for about a week. About a week and a half later, I said, "The hell with this place, I want to go." Man, that man begged me, "I'll double your pay. Just stay. Don't go nowhere. Just stay here," And I didn't quite get it then at first, but I understood. He didn't understand where I was coming from, but finally it grew on him. He said, "Oh man, this boy, he's bad." Same thing happened to me when I went to Cincinnati, Ohio. We got into a group there, and well, not quite the same thing, because they liked me from the time I walked in the door. But when I left and came back home, for a whole year, they kept calling me, "Please come back, please come back. We're going to the studio, please." And I wish I had done some of that, because the only recordings that I have, I don't have possession of them.